Good morning, everyone. Go with the mic. We started a little bit late because breakfast started late, so we're going to get right into it. But welcome to Project Financing and IDAs. We have we're very fortunate to have an incredibly accomplished panel here. If I were to read all their resumes and bios, I think we'd be here for half the time. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves and briefly what their role is with their respective IDAs. Bill?
Bill Mannix, Town of Islip Economic Development, an IDA Director. I've been the Economic Development Director since 1993, the IDA Director since 1992. And the role is kind of self-explanatory. As with all of the panel, our charge is to maintain and our local economic development ecosystem and help the local economy grow.
Good morning. My name is Shelley Bracely, and I guess I have a unique position. I sit with Nassau County IDA Board, but I represent Hempstead, the village of Hempstead, for matters that relate to the village only. I am brand new to this effort in Hempstead. A little bit of my background: I am from Hempstead. I sit on several committees, including the State of Black Long Island. I'm on that committee, as well as racial and ethnic disparities in the juvenile justice system, the Georgetown team. So that's who I am. I represent the community.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Catapano. I'm the Executive Director of the Suffolk County Industrial Development Agency, and we have a staff of 5 individuals that serve and support our 7-member Board of Directors. And just like with Bill, I've done this for a few years.
Tony, good to see you again. Richard Kessel. I am chairman of the Nassau IDA board. We have a board of 7 members. None of them are here today, but they come from various parts of the community. They do a terrific job. This is a volunteer job for them, and we do a lot. And I'm not like Tony or Bill. I've only been at the IDA about a year. I came in with the Laura Curran administration, and we have a new IDA. We've got a lot of new ideas, and one thing I will indicate, and I'll talk about this later, one of our main priorities is affordable and workforce housing in the county. I think we've all seen some of the stories that have been written about housing, and there are a lot of challenges, but one of them is we don't have enough of it. And so we're looking to do a lot of affordable and workforce housing, and that's a critical part of our mission and that of Laura Curran's.
And from the kids' table over here, I guess they haven't let me in the group yet. I'm still sort of on the outs. Harry Coughlin, CEO of the Nassau County IDA. I have been in the role for about 10 months, no prior government agency experience. I come from the private sector, and I think that point of view has added value to the way we're looking at it. So I'm trying to bring that level of experience to the team. And I just want to take a moment to welcome Shelley to the IDA community. Welcome, we look forward to working with you.
I think we only have one microphone, so you guys hold on to it. We'll start, since it's down there, we'll start with Harry and Richie. What exact benefits does the IDA provide? I think everyone's familiar with it, they see tax breaks, but what can the IDA do to help promote growth in Nassau County?
So there are actually 2 separate organizations under our management. One is the IDA. There is a second organization, the Local Economic Assistance Corporation. And I'll start there because it's the simplest to explain. We can arrange tax-exempt financing for nonprofit institutions vis-a-vis bonding. So if they have a capital program, they're looking to bond, they can come to us and we can work with them to arrange for tax-exempt financing. That's the sole benefit we can provide to the nonprofit sector, and something we're going to be looking to promote further. In terms of the IDAs, there are really 3 key levels of benefits. I'll start with sales and use tax. There can be a full or partial exemption on furniture, fixtures, equipment that you're putting in as part of a capital program. And there is mortgage recording tax if you are acquiring a property. It's a partial exemption. We cannot exempt the MTA portion, but we can provide tax savings there. And that's important because that is a savings on your immediate near-term investment. So that will help lower your ROI, lower your investment. But the longer-term benefit is, everybody's aware of pilot programs, payments in lieu of taxes, and what that provides is really a schedule of tax certainty on your property taxes over a term, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Payments are being made. They are in place of property taxes. But what we provide is sort of cost certainty for investment cases so you can better manage your ROI in making those investments. Some people look at them as property tax exemptions or abatements. I look at them as just really providing cost certainty over a period of time.
Yeah, I'll just add that we've got three main missions, I guess. One is to bring new business to Nassau County to expand the tax base. I think that's critical. Nassau County is a great place to do business, and we've got a very business-friendly administration. And so trying to attract new business to the county is at the core of what we try to do. Secondly, we want to make sure that we retain companies that are here that might want to leave, especially leave the state, because let's face it, we are one of the highest taxed areas in the country. And that's a challenge. And whether it's retaining businesses by helping them with pilot payments or tax incentives, or creating housing for people, especially transit-oriented development, to keep people here is critically important as well. And also, I think, helping companies that are here expand their businesses. We have a couple of items, one in particular, for instance, our board is meeting next week, and you're all welcome to come. They're open meetings, and we do them all at night except for next week because of the holidays. And one of the projects is a business that's here that wants to expand and add jobs, and that's critically important. We want to see more jobs because more people that are working, that's good for the taxpayer, it's good for the workers out there, and it's money spent in Nassau County. And so that's the mission that we're after, and I think we're getting there. I think we turned the corner in Nassau County. I think there were some challenges from the past IDA, and I think having people like Harry, and I do want to recognize Danielle Oglesby and Catherine Fee. Is there anyone else from our staff that are here? We have a great staff. We have a whole new staff. They do a terrific job, and we're open for business. You should come to see me, Harry, Danielle, Catherine, anytime.
Tony, similarly, I imagine Suffolk County IDA is similar a little bit. How does it work? How does a developer come to you? They come before they buy the property? What are you looking for? If they're someone who's looking for IDA assistance, how does it start?
Well, that's a great question, Sean. So, it's the issue of what for, and should you come to the IDA before you even start the whole process? But I think most IDAs, you start with the land use issues, the zoning, if there needs to be zoning changes, etc. So generally, IDAs don't like to be ahead of the process because the towns and the local municipalities control the zoning and the permit and approval process. So I think us in particular, and I think most IDAs prefer a developer or a project to start with the local land use issues, and then have that underway. Have an initial meeting with us so we could establish a relationship and check on the project from time to time, and then at some point it becomes an IDA application, and we have monthly meetings. It's a two-step process, so it's the initial approval or review by our board of directors at a board meeting, monthly board meeting, and then if the project is approved, it's approved preliminarily. The benefits, the concept of the benefits are discussed and known, and then we do a public hearing. IDA is required to do a public hearing to seek public comment, and that notice is sent to the the chief elected official of the county, of the particular town, if it's in a village, the village mayor, and then the school superintendent. And we hold the public hearing, and then we have a transcript that we use as a court stenographer to record the transcript. And most of the time, these projects are not controversial. They're usually in previously approved industrial parks. And so, basically 9 times out of 10, no one is attending these hearings. As much as we try to encourage attendance, it's just, they're not really controversial. The housing projects, on the other hand, bring out a little more public attention. But after the public hearing, you go back before the board of directors again for the final approval, and then the negotiations start as far as the documents, and then ultimately a closing.
And Shelley, I want to get to your role in between them, but Phil, similar process in Islip as far as how it gets started and what you're looking for?
Yeah, just very similar. The one difference that we have, there are 109 industrial development agencies in the state of New York, and we are the only one that has a board that's comprised of the 5 elected officials that were the original sponsor of the state legislation that created the IDA. So you need to know that the IDAs are actually a creature of the state. You can't have one unless an act of the state legislature has been passed creating it. So we do not have, our board looks different than everybody else's board in the state. So we won't accept an application until the land use issue is resolved. We'll have discussions with people about whether we think that the project that they're proposing to us is a viable IDA project, but we'll send them on their way until they've resolved their land use issue. But like Tony said, the vast majority of the projects that we do are non-controversial because they involve the industrial sector, not a developer. They can, if there's a developer who owns a small industrial park or a large industrial park, they can involve a developer. But in most of our industrial projects, which constitute the vast majority of our work, we're talking about an end user, we're talking about a manufacturer, a distributor who's looking to build or buy a bigger building that they're currently in, and the land use issue has already been resolved because they're not purchasing property that isn't zoned for their use. As Tony mentioned, where we do see some controversy are mixed use and housing developments, but the controversy generally surrounds the land use decision that's made prior to the IDA's use. It can get controversial when people are maybe not understanding that a project, at least from our perspective, we believe they're not understanding that a project won't happen without the assistance of the IDA, and that's what we see a lot in the current environment of housing and mixed-use projects.
And then, Shelley, what's your role then at that process as far as being a conduit to the community? And I know it's relatively new, but how do you envision it?
Okay, well, I haven't actually started yet, but my first course of action was to develop a newsletter letting our community, I think Hempstead is a unique place. It's positioned tremendously. It has incredible potential. However, when pilots and these things started coming into this area, I think we were a little exploited. So Hempstead is a community that has 17 apartment buildings that have pilots. We have 6 car dealerships that have pilots. We're an incorporated village, so we don't collect the sales tax, so I don't understand how there's any economic benefit. So what's happened is the community has become devastated. Our taxes are outrageous because we are supplementing these projects. I think my role is to educate the community and empower the community with information so that we can now have, in my newsletter, I have this reprint of an article of a Garden City pilot. There's not a pilot in Hempstead, I promise you, that it remotely resembles this one. We need to have the information so that we can organize and develop the civics and develop the Chamber of Commerce's and develop those things which will help us help our community. So we won't have so many zombie homes. We won't have so many people walking away from their homes because their tax base has eroded to a level where they just absolutely cannot afford it. Their houses are paid for, but their taxes they can't afford. And so I think what happens in a community like Hempstead, other communities look at it. Let's face it, in Long Island, if we don't do the development that most of these developers are talking about, it's not going to survive. But where is the equity in doing so? And how do we make sure that the disenfranchised communities are educated and represented differently than the way that they've been? So my role is to help the people in the community understand what a pilot is. I was one of the biggest naysayers of pilots until actually I started working for the town and started sitting in some of these hearings and listening to what other communities were getting, you know? And so, wow, this could work for us. I sat on a school board. I see what our school doesn't get. I see that we don't get the funds. I see we have apartment buildings where you have 2 or 3 families living in an apartment, sending children to the schools, and those apartment buildings are paying no taxes. So there should at least be, so what I'm saying is the people need education so that we understand how the system works and that all communities have some equity in pilots and the way they're distributed so that we can have a better quality of life.
I think you hit on a few things. They're all important. But one of the things that's interesting about that is we've been doing a panel like this similarly for a number of years now. One of the big differences has actually been with Laura Curran's administration as far as transparency and education to the community about the pilots. I think you hit on that as far as how the community is communicated with what's going on with the pilot. But you hit on one other thing as far as the apartments. I think everyone focuses on job creation, but I think all administrations that are up here are focused on workforce housing and apartments. Rich, can you speak to that some people see an apartment building go up and they say construction jobs and maybe super, but there's a benefit beyond that too.
Yeah, well, first of all, just to be clear, most of the pilots that you're referring to are Town of Hempstead IDA projects, not the county. That's an important point. And
I did put in my chart where they
right, all right, well, just to make that clear, and the IDA no longer does car dealerships. It did in the past. I don't know if we did them in your village, and we shouldn't have. I wasn't there, our IDA wasn't there, but I don't believe that IDAs should be doing self-storage facilities and car dealerships. And I do think we should be listening to the community. And I think that's critically important. So when the village, we don't have any pending village projects in the village of Hempstead. We'd love to have some housing projects to help provide more housing to the village of Hempstead. And we hope that the village government will work with us. We've met with the mayor. We've met with some of the board members of the village board. We encourage them to work with some of the developers because we'd love to do some projects and have your assistance and community input in the village of Hempstead. But, in terms of housing, again, I think it's critically important that IDAs, and I'm going to only speak for Nassau County, and I know where our board is, are very tuned in to the need to provide housing. It's critically important, especially affordable and workforce housing. Someone just came to me, I don't know if she's here, Barbara Epstein, before, and there she is in the back, and it said, why do we only do 10%? I think that's a good point. Obviously, it has to be economically feasible for the developer to build the housing. And I will tell you flat out that most of the housing in Nassau County cannot be built without IDA assistance. At the same time, we have to make sure that there is a balance with the community. We want to make sure that the community is supportive of it. I will tell you right now, we're not going to get in the middle of a battle between, you know, the community and the developer. The developer has to go out there, do their outreach, and make sure that the community, or the majority of the community, is for the project. The IDA shouldn't be the entity that, you know, takes the heat. We want to take the help. We want to be able to help the community. So the community has to be for a project. I think the other thing is there has to be a good mix of units. You know, for instance, just to have market rate apartments is no longer viable and no longer acceptable in Nassau County. You're going to have to come in with an affordability component. We can discuss what that component can be, but there's got to be affordability because, you know, we've seen apartments go up where, frankly, workforce people cannot afford them, even with IDA help. And if the IDA is going to go and assist, we've got to insist that there be affordable components to all of these projects. And finally, just to indicate that, you know, communities are very important, and we listen. And as Tony said, we have a public hearing on every project. In addition, I personally reach out to every elected official representing the area where the project is going to let them know, here's what the project is. We want you to be involved. Here's when the public hearing is. Come down, speak about it, etc. And I think that that's critically important because, you know, if we can't create more housing in Nassau County, in the end, our economy is going to be stifled. We're not going to make it. So that is a priority that I think we need to do. But I agree with you 100%. It needs to be done with community input. And we look forward to working with the village. Maybe we can figure out a way to get some of the developers to sit with the village and get some projects in the village of Hempstead that work for the community and also can be financed by the developer.
Bill, can you speak to this? You've had a lot of experience with instances where people think job creation is the only metric by which you can measure success of the idea. I think there's a lot more to it, and that's one of the major misconceptions.
Correct. And actually, I want to say that my state senator is in the back of the room. I want to thank Senator Boyle for coming to listen to me speak ad nauseum about economic development issues. But actually, much of the pressure about jobs comes from the state of New York. That is their major metric when considering an economic development project. And that makes tremendous sense to me, because where does the state get the bulk of its revenue? They get the bulk of their revenue from taxes paid by corporations and or individuals. So the more jobs that are created, the more revenue the state is getting. Localities do not get the direct benefit that the state gets from jobs being created. That's not to say that it isn't an important factor. It's not to say that it isn't the most important factor. I believe it is the most important factor. But it's not the only factor. What we get directly is taxable assessed value. And so we want to see new construction. That new construction adds taxable assessed value, which stabilizes your local tax base and should have that long-term impact of keeping your taxes lower than they would be without the increased taxable assessed valuation. Notice I didn't say it will lower your taxes, because the taxing jurisdictions have a way of increasing their spending on an annual basis to kind of eat up some of the benefits you get from that increased taxable assessed value. I also wanted to make a point about how, in my view, we should all be viewing which projects that we will provide support for and which we shouldn't provide support for. And I always ask myself the question, what public benefit is being provided by this project? And if you can answer that, and if you can answer it in a concrete way, where the public benefit is specifically stated somewhere in my case, somewhere in the town's master plan, somewhere in we have an approved economic development plan, Town of Islip Economic Development Plan. We also have an approved Commercial and Industrial Incentive Board plan. If you can't find the public benefit in any of those documents, then it's unlikely that you should be providing assistance to that project. And to kind of put a practical application to it, Richie, where would you find in any planning document adopted by Nassau County that we should be attracting self-storage facilities and car dealerships? So, I mean, I share your view. I really think that was a mistake, and it was a black eye to our profession that occurred. But it's past everybody, I think. Although the town of Hempstead, the village of Hempstead is still living with the past decisions. But I think everyone needs to understand that there should be some public policy goal that's being advanced by your support of this project. We have a bird flying around inside here.
Tony, I'd imagine it's similar in Suffolk, but is one of the items that you look for is, a lot of these projects didn't create much tax revenue to begin with. So while they're getting a substantial break, it's a net positive as far as where the taxes were before and some other benefits. Is that one of the criteria that you look at when considering a project?
I think you're referring to the property tax abatement?
Yeah, if you have, for example, a piece of vacant land that's going to collect $20,000 for taxes a year, but you put up a new project that's going to get a 50% benefit, but it'll create $500,000 in taxes that year. Is that one of the major components?
So a big misnomer is the amount. Everyone seems like it's a giveaway, but actually, in our case, you know, our typical manufacturing company that we're assisting, it's a 10-year term property tax abatement, and it starts at 50% abatement, and then it burns off over time. So it ends up being like a 27.5%, 28% savings. So they're really paying 72, 73% over that 10-year period. And a lot of our projects are saving maybe over the 10 years $300,000, so that's like $30,000 a year. With new construction, as Sean mentioned, so there's a land value and cost that's small as far as what they're paying in taxes, and then when something's built, that's what gets the abatement, is on the increased improvement. And so instead of it being become 100% taxes in year one, it's phased in over time, and it ends up being a net positive increment over each year.
Can I give a positive example?
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a positive example. It is a housing project, so but it's in my mind. The data is in my mind because it happens to be in my local district, my local school district, about a half mile from my house. There was a controversial assisted living facility built in Sayville, Bristol, and the land use issue was the controversial one. Of less controversy was the fact that the IDA supported the assisted living facility. The assessed value on the property prior to the development of the project was $329,500, and that's an assessed value. Don't try and compute it to market value because you've got the equalization rate that enters into all of this. But upon completion, the assessed value on the property increased to $2.5 million. The local taxing jurisdictions, by the second year of operation of that building, were receiving more tax revenue than they were getting prior to. So you had a construction period where they actually demolished some buildings. They lost a little bit of value, but by year one, they were made whole. By year two, they were receiving more. That's a 666% increase in taxable assessed value. And by the time that pilot burns off, I think we're in year 6 or 7 right now, every taxing jurisdiction will be receiving 666% more revenue than they would have received. And during the course of the pilot, they are receiving more revenue than they were receiving prior to.
Big difference. So, and this is kind of for anyone. What everyone's touched on is high taxes, high costs. When you try to have someone stay in the community or lure them to the island, I imagine that comes up in every conversation. How do you attack that problem? You can't hide it for the most part, but I'd imagine that's a lot to not only attracting people, but retaining what we have. Is the IDA useful in that respect to try to make it more palatable for someone to come to the community? Aaron?
Looking at it from a sales perspective, sales and marketing, we're out there and we're speaking about the benefits. It's the access to transportation, the proximity to New York City, highly skilled workforce, great educational systems, whether it's K through 12 or our universities. But yes, there is always those challenges, there are those objections that are going to be raised, and we can't hide from the fact that it's a high-cost area, whether it's labor, taxes, utilities, it's higher here. The question I come back to is, to these businesses, what's your overarching strategy? What are you looking to achieve? I think that sometimes, the value is in the proximity to New York City. The value is in the access to our skilled labor. You're not going to get that in another smaller market, and you're not going to get the access to maybe some of the financial markets here. So just like anything else, location, 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 and the cost to operate here is higher. But we don't hide from it, like you say. We just put it right on the table. We understand it, and that's why we're having the conversation we're having about incentives. It's what can we do to incentivize you or to help you in your cost analysis, not only from a capital perspective, but from an ongoing operating expense.
And then I'd imagine there's public policy goals with that, that if you do attract that company to come in, that they'll utilize local labor or other things like that. And Shelley, I don't know if that's somewhere where you would come in this role as well, to make sure that those jobs that are being created go to people within the community, not to New Jersey companies or something like that.
Well, that's absolutely correct. And so when you come in and you have these labor agreements, and when you have, my biggest issue in my community is a compliance officer to make sure that the things that you said you were going to do, you do. We don't have that. The payments, once you receive a pilot, should people really be living the way they're living in our communities? Most of the apartment buildings, especially, 590, 600, and 100 Terrace. They're notorious throughout the island. They're the two largest projects in the island, I'm sure. 590, 600 had a doorman and a concierge when I was a little girl living in Hempstead. And what happens is when communities become devastated, they want to move the poor people in one area. And so those high condominiums turned into projects. So how do we stop that from happening? Right now, as I said, I do a lot of community advocacy, and I sit on racial and ethnic disparities in the juvenile justice system. We have a juvenile justice system where 50% of all of the children that are taken in Nassau County come from one zip code. And that's the zip code that I live in, 11550. We have to look at these disparities and what's going on and why they're going on, and figure out with this whole housing thing that Newsday just did, that was, I'm sure, a big surprise to everybody. We have to figure out how we're going to change it, and moving forward with the projects that's coming in, how are we going to treat communities like Hempstead? How are we going to help? How are we going to try to change it and turn it around? So yes, workforce is extremely important to us. Work development is extremely important to us, because we have a community that has the largest numbers of unemployed in the county of Nassau. And we have to be honest about these things. It is what it is. I didn't make any of it up. But I grew up here. I've been here all my life. I don't plan on leaving. All my brothers and sisters are gone. Nobody's still here. And it's because it's so difficult. So how do we make the corrections? And I believe that together we can. But we have to be able to talk about it and address it and deal with it. So we need compliance in Hempstead. We need to make sure that when we do have these agreements that somebody's there looking at it and making sure that it's happening. That doesn't happen. When you receive a pilot, people shouldn't live in the conditions that they're living in if you're getting the kind of tax breaks that you're receiving. If you have a car dealership and the community doesn't get any benefit from the sales tax or anything else, all we're doing is supplementing your car dealership, how are you giving back to the community? And even with the university that pays $40,000 consistently every year, but $40,000 with the amount of property that you have, and how many of our children, since we know we have a failing school district, are you helping? How can we be good neighbors if we receive pilots? So those are the things that I just want you to kind of think about and help me solve in Hempstead.
Probably a question for everyone. So where is it going? You guys, everyone's touched on transparency and communication. Self-storage is done. It's not happening anymore. That's clear. Where do you see it going? I know some people have spoken about retail, and that's a possibility to make downtowns more vibrant. How that can contribute. There's the tourist exception, but that's kind of narrow. But where do you see it going?
I'll start. I'll leave retail to Nassau County because Richie has been recently spoken about that. We are constrained by state law in doing retail projects, so there are exceptions, and maybe Richie can be successful in getting additional exceptions to the rule. I think two things. One trend that I saw, and with us it has dropped off a little bit, but for 3 or 4 years, starting about 2014, we saw a good deal of movement westward. Now, that's not unusual because the island developed from west to east, but we saw a lot of companies, manufacturing companies especially, leaving the boroughs and coming as far out as Islip, which is unusual in my experience. I imagine that's typical of Nassau County. You would think that manufacturing companies would move close enough so that their current workforce can remain with them. But we saw a lot of movement of manufacturing companies out of the boroughs. It subsided a little bit, and I think that was all related to real estate issues, and people were either being pushed out of their rental space in the boroughs because their real estate values had gone up so much, or if they actually owned the properties where they were cashing out on those properties and coming east. And again, that's unusual for us that someone would make that move from the boroughs out to exit 56 on Long Island Expressway. And now that I believe what we're seeing a big trend in is rental housing. The town of Islip, IDA, did its first housing project in Central Islip. I see Eileen here and Debbie Kavanaugh from Central Islip. Eileen used to be with the Central Islip Civic Council. And we did our first housing project in 1989. One of the first IDAs to do housing projects. And we've done a number of them through the years in a variety of different spaces, in senior housing, in 100% affordable housing, in market rate, in downtown, mixed use, transit oriented. We're seeing all of that in large numbers now. And it comes with some controversy, typically about the land use. So I think I see that trend continuing. We can't pull apart the need for the increase in jobs from the issue of housing because they're so interrelated, and as is the issue of creating vibrant downtowns, so that downtown mixed-use kind of housing that you're going to see, transit-oriented. There's a place for IDAs to get involved there because if you don't have those kinds of housing options, then you're not going to attract the workers that the companies who are looking to move to where you are need.
Tony, do you see the same thing as far as workforce housing and that type of trend?
Well, Bill is correct. Historically, we benefit from being suburbs of New York City. So they outgrow whatever their facilities are in New York City, or now I guess they're being pushed out as a result of housing their buildings being purchased and multifamily housing and condos being built. And then usually historically they've stayed in, had a brief stay, or not a brief stay, maybe 10 years or so in Nassau County in a facility there, and then outgrew that, and then they move on to Suffolk County. So that trend, as Bill mentioned, is still continuing. What I've noticed too, I think probably all of us, is that with the changes in technology and the jobs, I mean, so the primary metric for an IDA that the state kind of imposes on us is the job numbers. And it's like you're not really seeing the level or the amount of jobs being created as we once saw. So you're not seeing 50, 100 jobs for each project. It's kind of a smattering of maybe 10, 15 jobs per project in most cases. And I think that's as a result of the change in technology and also we all have clawbacks now. And I think the companies are being more realistic on their job growth, where there was really no repercussions. If they said, oh, I'm going to create 50 jobs, I mean, you would monitor it all, but there was no clawbacks. Now there are. And
Just a couple of things. First of all, I think the state has to look, and it's good to see Phil Boyle here. He's a great guy, and I appreciate all the work that we did together when I was at LIPA. One of the things I think we have to look at is when you create a housing project, there aren't a lot of jobs with that project. You know, there may be 2 or 3. And to be penalized by that is ridiculous. It's not just about jobs, it's about creating job opportunities. And that's what housing does. There aren't a lot of jobs. Sure, there are construction jobs, and by the way, we want as many of those jobs to be labor jobs, the union jobs. Our unions do a great job. They build great facilities, and I think that they need to be engaged. And we require, and we make it very clear to any developer that if you're going to build a project with IDA assistance, you've got to sit with the unions and you've got to give them a chance to bid on that project. And we have had some scuffles with some developers over this, but we insist on that. In the end, you have to make the deal that you have to make, but you've got to sit with the trades and the other unions to give them a fair chance to work on a project here in Nassau County. The other thing I just want to mention is that we need to have the ability to help downtowns. You go through a lot of downtowns, and whether it's the village of Hempstead or to the other extreme, Great Neck or Port Washington, there are empty stores everywhere. And, part of that is societal. This is a world now where, you pick up the phone, you order a package, and, you don't have to go to your downtown. Maybe that's where this world is going. But right now, we've got a lot of struggling retailers in villages downtown. And while transit-oriented development can help that, and we want to encourage it, I think we also need to make sure that IDAs have some capability to help struggling downtowns and retailers. Not necessarily with a pilot agreement, because you can't start giving these mini pilot packages to every store that's vacant. But the fact is that there are ways that we can go through grants, loans, low-cost financing loans to help struggling downtowns and retailers and groups of stores that we should be able to do. Right now, we really can't do that unless we stretch the law, and that's not something we're going to do. So if we really want to help downtowns, I think the IDA is a perfect vehicle for that. And we've already met with Ryan Silva, who's head of the State Economic Development Association that represents IDAs and other economic development entities. And we are going to, hopefully press with the legislature in its next session starting in January to look at IDAs. Everyone loves to criticize the IDAs and say what we should not allow them to do. I think, and by the way, some of that criticism may be deserved from prior years. I'll be the first to say it. In Nassau County, and I'm only going to speak for Nassau County, I think we've cleaned up our act, but we have to be as transparent as we can be. But at the same time, we have to be given the capability to help downtown villages to survive and to continue. And where you have a retailer and they've been there a long time and they're older, they should be able to work with their employees so their employees can take that store over and continue to provide jobs in the community.
I'd just like to be clear that we don't develop housing, we don't create jobs, we're simply a conduit. We facilitate the investment case scenario and try to make it, the metrics work for the investor, the shareholders, the funding for it. One of the things that made my head spin when I first joined this agency, I've been a resident of Nassau for 15 years now. I was shocked that it's 1 county, 2 cities, 3 towns, 64 villages, 56 school districts, and there's actually 8 IDAs. And I had no idea where to turn, who to go to, how to figure this out. With the villages, you have those that are very progressive. They want to revitalize the downtowns, and then you have those that seem to be frozen in time. And as the chairman said earlier, we are here to support once it has the local approvals, the local support. But boy, we wish that perhaps some more of those locals were a little bit more progressive in their thinking.
We did get a late start, so I want to make sure we can get some questions in if anybody has them. Go ahead.
So I'm hearing some change in philosophy and so forth, so I want to be reminded about, number one, what percentage of projects actually do get your IDA help and, whatever? What are your metrics of success? We're hearing about clawbacks because the metrics of success didn't work before. And third, I'd like to turn the thing on the opposite coin. And if you're successful, how do you deal with the issues of gentrification that actually drive out the communities that you're trying to support?
Why did I get elected for that question? I'm old enough, I can't even remember what the second question was.
What percentage of projects actually get approval? And what are your metrics of success nowadays since they've changed? And then third, how do you deal with these unintended consequences?
Okay. So we'll start with, I can say the first question is easy for me. I have never had a project turned down by the board in 28 years. The reason is we don't accept an application for a project that I know doesn't bring that public benefit, that public policy
So
goal.
what percentage of applications then do you get and then approve?
That's not even the measurement either. I won't even accept an application. So the question, I guess the question rephrased with how many companies do you talk to, or how many development projects do you talk to? And this is totally unscientific, but probably 5% we shoo away and say this is not a viable IDA transaction. And I think that's because, generally speaking, the people who approach us are savvy enough. They're usually represented by a real estate broker or commercial real estate broker or an attorney that understand what does work and what doesn't work with the IDA. So again, that's not an issue with us. Second part of your question, the metrics. We have to answer to a variety of metrics to the New York State Controller and the Authority Budget Office. Primarily, they're looking at jobs, but you have to when we collect the data at the time of application, you've got to put your investment numbers in there. You've got to put your construction jobs, your permanent jobs, and that's the data that they measure and want us to want us to use as our metrics. However, the frustrating part about that is, and Rich mentioned Ryan Silva before, the New York State EDC is suggesting that they should have housing starts in, or units, number of units in there, if we're talking about housing projects. And let me give you another kind of idea of, because we've talked a lot about housing today, and I've talked a lot about housing, but I want you to know that we have 132 projects as of the end of 2018 in our portfolio, and housing represents, I think, about 17 or 18 of those projects. So the vast majority of what we do, and I think the mix is going to be very similar across the board, the vast majority of what we do is we work in the industrial office sector. So just so you understand the perspective, because then that gets to the last question, which is about gentrification. I haven't experienced that. I think I can't explain why. A good deal of our housing has been on vacant former sites. We started in Central Islip on property that used to be the New York State psychiatric facility. We're looking at a project right now that will occur if it does get through the land use process on property that's currently owned by a college, formerly owned by Suffolk County in downtown Bayshore. So we're not seeing in our communities the kind of unintended consequence of pushing the people out that really started the community or have been with the community for a long time.
All right, stuck in 3 single questions. Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, I think it's great information that all of you as panelists are given, right? But I want to get back to what Ms. Braisley was talking about, right? And so you get all these pilots, right? And it seems like the IDA, along with the towns and the villages, you were confused, I was confused when I moved to Nassau about 27 years ago, right? And then we see the big statistic that just came out, right? About really the divide here in Nassau County, right? And then when we get all of these monies and these projects and whatnot have you, it seems that a certain amount of people in one area, right, get everything that they want, and I'll use Hempstead and Garden City, right, as a segue, right? Where one side, they're really one, right, but one side gets all the bells and the whistles, and then the other side looks like it's dilapidated. I don't understand that if we're all paying tax dollars, and why is the money not being reverted back into those communities? And the young lady in the beginning, a student said, hey, what about Wyandanch? Well, what about all the other communities in Long Island that are being forgotten about, right? Because I hear about Mr. Maddox just said, well, that last part, I don't know about that part. And not pointing at you specifically, but we just can't keep, shoving it to the side, kicking it like rocks or garbage to the side. Because guess what? These young people that live on Long Island, all of us, no matter what their background is, no matter what they look like, guess what? They're the future of Long Island. So what are we doing now to rebuild and revitalize all communities on Long Island, where we can all thrive for a better quality of life? Let's talk about that.
But I think I can direct that a little bit because I think it's going to apply to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest myths and misconceptions with pilots is that when that money comes in, it goes to that community. So it doesn't go to the IDAs. And I think that comes up frequently. So when the Wyandanch was a perfect example. That money is going to the Wyandanch School District. So I think that's one of the things that, Harry, maybe you can speak to that a little bit, that the school districts, when there's a Nassau County IDA, I think some people don't realize where that money is ultimately going. And I think you touched on some other issues too, but that's just one of the
Well, it's not really about the pilots for the school district. I don't see the monies really going back into the communities, revitalizing our communities. I don't see it at all. I mean, we keep talking about it. Yeah, I got a dream, I'm doing this, let's work together. Where's the money? Where's it going? I don't see nothing being built up.
So you're speaking about developer dollars then,
Yeah,
making the investments in
certain
the community.
communities are being revitalized and others are still in the Stone Age. Why is that?
And that's the point I was making earlier about the 64 villages. They have different perspectives. And without saying, anything about any one village, it comes down to local leadership, in my opinion. And I think that we are here to partner, to make things happen. And Shelley made the point early on. We engage with the community. We engage with the civics. We want to hear from them before we put a stamp of approval on a project. We want to know that it's right for the community. And that's our approach. Now, I can't tell you why a developer is looking in one area versus another in terms of where to make their investment. I just know that we stand ready to facilitate if it's right for the community.
And who chooses which community gets what? That's the other issue, right?
Just a point, that's not an idea, the IDA doesn't initiate these projects, it's the developer that comes to the IDA with a project. And I think some of the local economic development entities have to encourage developers to do that. We just so you understand, we don't develop projects. We accept projects and try to assist them. So I think it's not the IDA's ability to tell someone where they should develop. I'm with you in the second, and I'm going to be frank with you about it. We have been talking to several developers about doing some projects in the village of Hempstead. And I think, I don't want to mention the projects, but they are having a lot of problems getting the community to unite behind these projects. And they're housing projects, and I think they'd be helpful to the village. We can't force the developer to do these projects, and we want to make sure that the village is supportive of it. I know there are issues with sewers, water hookups, and they're looking at that, but in the end, if there's an incorporated village, and it shouldn't be just about the village of Hempstead, but if there's an incorporated village, they need to get their village boards and village officials to unite and go to developers and say, we need housing here, we need those benefits here. Then they can come to the IDA, and by the way, it could be the town IDA as well, as the county IDA, although I'm speaking for us, we welcome those projects. I have met with several developers about 2 specific housing projects in the village, and we've encouraged them, go to the village board, talk to the mayor. Harry and I met with Mayor Ryan about it. Get the village to get behind these projects or other projects that you favor, and I will tell you, if you bring that to the IDA, we will help get that project done.
So, as a person that lives in Hempstead and pays taxes in Hempstead on a home, we're scared to let developers in because we pay so much. They get so much, 20 and 30-year pilots and tax breaks. So, as a homeowner, where's my break? So that's how we feel.
And
that's how we feel.
Yeah, and I understand, and that's one of the challenges that IDAs face. Why does this one get a tax break? Well, and I think that's a great question. And the answer is, if you got to incentivize them, it's almost impossible in Nassau County to build an apartment complex or whatever you want to call it without getting some IDA breaks. But then there are people that will come to us, I agree, and say, well, wait a minute, why are you giving tax breaks to this new building? I'm a taxpayer, I own a house, where's my tax break? And that's the philosophical argument out there that I believe all the IDAs face, and we understand it. Bill?
Yeah, I mentioned this on our conversation that we had over the phone yesterday. Of the 17 or 18 housing projects we have in the town of Islip, every single one of them is tax positive. By that I mean is creating more taxation under the pilot agreement than existed previously prior to the project. So in my case, I can't talk about the village of Hempstead, but in my case, I can look somebody straight in the eye and say, you are not bearing the burden of extra taxation, because without our assistance, this project wouldn't have been built, and therefore the extra revenue that is now coming through to all of the taxing jurisdictions wouldn't be there. I do want to weigh in. Do we have time? I do want to weigh in on your issue. I agree with what's been said so far. That clearly, if there is an issue in a locale, in a downtown, in a village, in a community, then the first place to look at is whoever is sitting atop the government of that area, whether it's a village, a town, the county. But the IDA can play a role. We are not the primary role. First, it starts with elected leadership. But the IDA can play a role in advancing the public policy objectives that have been stated by the local elected officials. And I would once again like to use Central Islip as an example. When I first started working for the town of Islip in 1981, we were trying to attract an anchor buyer of a 700-acre former psychiatric facility. And we worked very hard to get New York Institute of Technology to come out and buy the bulk of that 700 acres. It was not 100% successful effort because they're about ready to divest themselves of the remainder of the property that they have there. Their college, their second campus never materialized in the way that it was originally looked at, but that effort then begat a 35 or 40 year, I didn't do the math very quickly, a 35 to 40 year effort of additional development that occurred as a result of a specific revitalization master plan that was passed by the town board. And so that we knew in economic development, what is it that we're trying to do here in the Central Islip community? So in 1986, we applied for an economic development zones program, one of the first of the original 11 that were awarded in the state of New York. That became the Empire Zones program, which is what most people might remember. And that came with a whole host of state tax benefits, and that didn't work very well, perfectly. But what did work was the redevelopment of most of that former 700 acres into different uses right now. And that came from leadership at first, but the IDA has played a significant role through the years in seeing to it that where we can, we could advance those public policy goals that were articulated in a plan. And the most recent approval that we worked with, we got one of the $10 million grants that the state gives to local communities. So we are a DRI recipient in Central Islip. It's not a village, it's under the control of the town, and we received that grant, and Debbie is probably going to say something about it.
Last one, Debbie.
Bill, I'm basically directing this to you. Central Islip right now is looking at, as far as most of the communities concerned, is an oversaturation of two-bedroom apartments that are being scheduled over the next 5-6 years to be developed without the proper infrastructure and being addressed to the fire department needs, the ambulance corps needs, the school district needs, and the traffic needs. My question to you is, what role does the IDA play in getting the new developers to handle those situations?
So did everybody hear the question? So primarily, our role comes after the land use decisions are made. And you're aware of this because you go to all those meetings. So what Debbie is referring to is that New York Tech is about ready to divest themselves of an additional 87 acres, and there is a kind of a deal on the table that originally proposed mostly industrial development on those 87 acres. And if you think that Carlton Avenue can't handle the traffic for the housing, it definitely wouldn't have been able to handle the traffic for the truck. So the land use process is going to resolve that issue. Whether it resolves it to your liking or not, I can't speak. But once that land use issue is resolved with changes of zones, an amendment to the Central ISO Revitalization Master Plan, then we can take a look at what is proposed there. Does it meet our requirements for assistance? And if so, we will recommend that to our board.
This is a question to everybody. With all the development of two-bedroom apartments for the millennials, quote unquote, what happens when the millennials start having families want to move into houses? Because what I seem to see do is every county and township putting a two-bedroom apartment, but nobody's thinking about what happens or doing mixed use of two-bedroom family housing.
What happens is they go out into the single-family market, and once they start having children, that's the typical movement, and that's why the rationale for building rental apartments is multifaceted. One of which is you're giving young people and empty nesters an ability, or you're giving young people an ability to step into the housing market at the first rung, rather than having to climb up 3 rungs on the ladder and buy a house right away. But the other value is that when those millennials, I don't even know what's coming after the millennials, but when those millennials start to think about, okay, what is my next step? Like my children, who lived in apartments and then had a couple of children and said, in the city, by the way, and said, well, we need to buy a house. They came out and bought our houses that we're vacating, so we can either go to Florida or become empty nesters in rental living, once we age. I'm hoping that I'm going to end up in that assisted living facility at the end of my street.
We have a question over here.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I know these guys.
Could you just elaborate on the mind dance with how it benefited the school system? You were about to, but then you went.
Well, I think one of the things that came up on it, he said, how did the Wyandanch project benefit the school district? And I was just making a mechanical point as far as the money that comes into the pilot agreement then gets divided where it would go on the taxable roll. So the town gets a portion, the school district gets a portion, the county gets a portion. I think one of the misperceptions that we've encountered doing this panel is that the money goes to the IDA in some capacity and gets used differently. So maybe it's not enough, maybe that deal is maybe not satisfactory to some people, or maybe it will as the phases go on, but a portion of that money is going to the school district, was what I was saying. But,
And it is required to by state law.
and it's required to by state law. Here,
A 1-minute statement. My background is economic development and affordable housing. I've worked with Bill for many, many years. And I have to say, we've done a lot of projects together, whether it was industrial or housing. And if it wasn't for the IDA, they were very instrumental in helping the Civic Council be able to bring in commercial companies, bring in some housing into a community that was in desperate need of not only affordable housing, commercial property. We needed businesses, and IDA was very instrumental in helping us. And yes, as a civic leader, we would go out and talk to developers, but I'm just gonna say, maybe it's just Bill, but or the IDA. Bill was very instrumental. Like, we would go to him, Bill, what do you think of this plan? We're gonna steal equities. They came to me and said, we wanna do this. I went to Debbie, I said, let's go sit with Bill. What does Bill think? So again, as a developer, as a not-for-profit, we went to the IDA when we wanted to bring in commercial and we wanted to bring in housing. We went to them and I relied on Bill to give us good advice to do that. So that's the only thing I can say about that.
That's a good comment. I think that's a good one to end on. So thanks to our panelists.